Often these in-house agencies will call us because they're so kind of stuck in the inertia of their brand and creative ways.
Pros and cons.
Welcome to Pros and Cons, Engagement Unplugged. I'm Laura Smith.
And I'm Brian Rowley.
So creative work is now under pressure from every direction, and we know this and we deal with this every day. Tighter budgets, faster timelines, more channels, AI-generated content, and an endless demand for quote-unquote fresh thinking. But the real opportunity may not be producing more ideas faster. It may be rethinking the model altogether behind how ideas are found, shaped, challenged, and brought to life. So today, we'll dive into this idea on today's episode where we'll chat with a guest who's redefining the creative process with the goal of making it more accessible and democratized.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one, Laura. I think this is going to be a fun conversation, but I would say before we jump into that and before we bring on today's guest, let's talk about something that every marketer can likely recall. And I'm sure you've thought through, like, over your career, you've been involved in a lot of different creative campaigns, but what's actually been your favorite creative campaign over the course of your career? And then what kind of makes it stand out today?
So I'm going to go back to my days at Arnold, where I know our guest from, but it was Progressive Insurance and the infamous Flow, right? So we were the agency that started that campaign. We brought really boring industry of insurance into a super fun, creative world, basically. And so that campaign we started with and that was my first time doing like TV and broadcast. So I was all digital. And so I was able to get into the world of broadcast, which, coming back to it now, looking back, it was like I didn't love it, but it was fun and exciting and going to LA and spending all your time there and blah, blah, blah. But it takes 6 months to produce one 30-second spot. So to me, it was like overwhelming. But that whole concept and watching the creative team and kind of looking at the challenge that we're faced with and solving it in such a fun way by bringing flow and having the character, having our personality bring all of those commercials to life. It's so memorable. And when you say you knew Flo, I met Flo so many times. Her name's Stephanie Courtney. She was so down to earth and so real, like I think married to a teacher, like just very real life person. But when you saw her on camera and you saw her bring a script to life, it was just fascinating. So I feel like I have a little bit of that like fangirl still for her because, just the process of seeing a creative team take such a boring industry and concept and making that like the whole, the white background, shopping, blah, 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 blah. So that was definitely like has the biggest impression on my career, I would say. But like I said, it wasn't like I wanted to continue to make commercials. It was just more that it was the whole process from internally at the agency, the creative team, and then bringing it to life. And I ended up working on the motorcycle business, so Beyond the Auto. And that was some really, really cool creative that the team did that was just super fun and just different.
Yeah, I think the interesting stuff to that is I think when you can follow it through the whole process and actually see it versus just the individual piece that you have. I mean, there's nothing for me more exciting than like when you're selecting talent to be in something or you're scouting location for it or you actually show up on location and all those things. Like for me, that's always like the I guess the high of it. So, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, because honestly, the one like fun fact about that is the creative team did not select Flo. Like that's not who they wanted as the main spokesperson. Like that, like we were like, no. The client was like, no, this woman. And in the end, it was like, but that was a collaborative process. It just shows like, it's always like, oh, the client always like making the stuff boring. But really the client had like a really good perspective on it. And clearly it ended up being the perfect person. So it was just, again, watching that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Very fun.
But do you have one, Brian, that you kind of stands out for you?
Well, I think going back to my Verizon days, and I wasn't actually involved in the campaign, but I was involved with the team that was actually doing this. But Can You Hear Me Now? So the Test Man campaign that went on for years and years and years. And I actually, so the Test Man himself was a gentleman by the name of Paul Maccarelli. and had the opportunity to meet him through, obviously coming into our office and doing some stuff. And like, just as fun in that environment as he was, like his character, the way that he portrayed himself in our ads was very similar to who he was. He just was a really fun guy that had just a really cool energy to him. So that was actually one that stood out. And I think the interesting thing about that was, he was with that campaign for years. And then if you remember, ended up going to Sprint. And actually, he was a spokesperson for Sprint for a period of time. And then even further, then pivoted after that back to Verizon. And I think it was like 2018 or 19 or something around there. So it was just kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, a little bit of fan, type things as well. I mean, when I was with Panasonic, obviously we were very engaged with, Michael Phelps and Katie Ledecky, had the opportunity to meet them. Obviously two extremely decorated athletes from the U.S. Olympic swim team. Again, great people. And so it's always fun in that case. I mean, that's, taking, obviously people who are well-known and celebrity per se into account. But yeah, I think the Can You Hear Me Now was probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, what's interesting about those two that you mentioned, it's like, right, it's people becoming famous because of being in this commercials. Yeah. And then there's famous people that go into the, it's like, that's the dynamic. And, every creative person wants to put a famous person in a commercial. So that's fun. Okay, enough about us, enough about our lives, right? So I'm super excited for today's guest because I know him well for many, many years. He has spent more than 20 years in marketing, having overseen countless creative campaigns in agencies of all sizes. Pulling from his experience on the agency side, Will started his own consultancy called Ideasicle X, the first advertising SaaS platform designed specifically for virtual idea generation. The platform brings together creative talent from all over to collaborate and inspire ideas, transforming the way advertising agencies work with freelance creative talent. So please welcome Will Burns, founder and CEO of Ideasicle. Welcome, Will.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Yes, we're excited.
Yeah, welcome, Will. We're very excited to have you here. And I would say, I think this is such an interesting topic. I think let's just jump right in, and I would say, one of the things that I think is probably important to our audience is, from your perspective, when you sort of look at the creative model, which parts of it do you think brands are struggling with? Is it the way ideas actually get generated, evaluated, sold, executed? Where are you seeing some of the biggest struggles in the actual creative model itself?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, you kind of have to step back and look at how the industry has changed, because in the last 20 years or so, in-house agencies have become dominant. I think it's somewhere around 90% of all corporate America has some form of in-house agencies, some form of in-house agency. And what that has done, and in fact, oddly enough, it's why one of our biggest customers are in-house agencies at Ideasicle X, is insular thinking. And this is because if you think about an ad agency, you've got creative teams working on all kinds of different brands, sometimes multiple brands per day. And so it's always staying fresh. But when you're working at an in-house agency, you're only working on one brand all the time. And that can be good because you get, richer understanding of the brand. You probably know its history better than any ad agency does. But you also get caught in traps, creative traps, where it's basically insular thinking. You're stuck in ways of thinking that are hard to break out of. And so often these in-house agencies will call us just to get a dose of outside perspective thrown at them. And we'll come back to them with 10, 12 different ideas, some of which might be completely idiotic for them, and only they would know why. And that's the good part of being in an in-house agency. But some of them will be sort of mind-bending for them. It's like, oh my God, I never thought about that, because they're so kind of stuck in the inertia of their brand and creative ways.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I know that we see it all the time. And Laura, you and I have this conversation, whether it's not necessarily always about creative, but just in general. Like, our internal teams get so focused on what we know and how we speak to it, And we always are challenging ourselves to be able to say, but is that how our audiences understand it and interpret it? So I do think it's a really powerful thing to be able to say that, you know what, like we need someone outside to look at this to be able to give us a better perspective or a different perspective, one that we might not have thought of.
Yeah, we always say like we're talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we know, like we understand us, but like, you know, and that's again, just obviously, you know, using Will Your Team was the reason for that. It was like we need someone to come in and think differently who has no idea what who Brightside is and what we do. And it's hard to understand our business. And so it's like, but we needed that like fresh thinking because we're not getting it from internally. And it was just a different approach to try out. So it makes complete sense that why people look to the outside. But Will, like, do you, like it's right now, like I know I mentioned at the beginning about like creating a TV commercial and it takes so long just for like, you know, 10 lines of a script. It's insane. But now like people are looking for faster, more everything, right? No one has the patience for like a long process and all that. Do you think that's making people less creative because the pressure's on to do things quicker?
That's a good question. I have sort of two answers to that. One, I think it makes you more creative because you have to be. You have to find a solution more quickly. But it could make you less creative because you're not given enough time to actually think through the entire problem. So it depends on how you look at it, I guess.
Yeah, because like your process, though, working with your team is pretty fast.
Yeah, very fast.
It's fast, but you notice, you remember we didn't come in with 3 ideas and try to shove one down your throat as the recommendation. We came in with 10 or 12 and we sat back and let you consume them and debate them and talk about them. And I find that can be quite therapeutic for a client when they all, and not necessarily you guys, but I've seen in the past where, especially with brand ideas, taglines, things like that, like all the clients in the committee who are approving it, they all think they know the brand really, really well. But once they have to make a decision and they're looking at 10 or 12 different taglines, now they actually have to put a point on what they are and what they are not. It's almost like a sculptor getting rid of the parts that aren't the horse in order to have a sculpture of a horse. Like when you have 10 or 12 taglines in front of you, some people might say, oh my God, we'd never do that, that, and that. But we might just, this is kind of interesting over here. I never thought of our brand that way. And then somebody else says, well, I can't believe you think of our brand that way. And now all of a sudden you have this very constructive conversation that happens between them that becomes therapeutic and sharpens all of their focus on what the brand really is.
Yeah, I actually, through the process that we went through, and for those of you listening, we actually just recently worked with Will and his team on a campaign that we actually brought to life. And it was the first time, and Will, to be honest with you, I was a little hesitant coming into this because I was, you know, as we looked at it, you know, we're all very used to the overall approach of, you know, okay, you meet with the agency, you brief them, you sit down, you have this conversation, right? Like, and I mean, we did that, but it's all people that you're very familiar with for the most part, right? They're people that you've been working with and that. So the only familiar face to us when we started this conversation was you, because we sat down, we gave you sort of a brief of where we're going, but then you brought in a bunch of other individuals who were doing a lot of the gathering of information and understanding the brand and doing all that stuff. So it was at first a little bit of an uneasy process because it was unfamiliar. But then as we started to get through it, the thing that was really interesting to me was some of the questions that were coming up, because the things that we thought were like as clear as can be in terms of what we've already been delivering were the areas where people were like, wait, what do you mean exactly by that? And so it challenged us as well to see like, what are we working on and how is that actually resonating to folks that don't necessarily know the brand? I don't know about you, Laura, but I mean, obviously at the end we got very comfortable with the process, but at the beginning, I would say it was a little bit of an unknown.
Yeah, and I think it's like going back to what you were saying at the beginning, Will, about like, you know, it's insular and you're just kind of like in your own world. Like this came up because Brian and I were at a conference last fall, and it was like listening to big brands and talking about their campaigns. And we were like, these CMOs were basically presenting, and we're like, we just need one of those moments, basically. And ironically, moment is the word I'm using because that's part of the campaign. But it was like, we need one of those moments. And I'm like, but we don't need to go to like big agency and spend all this money. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with this, because I'm curious where your head's at. But like, we don't have the budget to go to big agency. We don't need to go through a 6-month process. Like, and so you came to mind because I'm like, well, Will's got this thing that like seems interesting. We've never used them. Like, I don't know. I have friends have used them, work with them. So it's like, well, we need someone to help us create that moment. And I was like, okay with not knowing how it all worked. I was like, well, let's just try it. Cause I know it's not gonna be $1 billion. And it's Will and a group of people that I've probably worked with in the past to some degree. And I felt like it was a risk worth taking, right, Brian? We were like, okay, like it's a risk worth taking. And it was a new way to think about the creative process in the world that we live in today, which is very different than the world was when I was in big, advertising agency. So that said, like, where's your head at, or how do you think about those you come from all these big agencies. And so like, how do you think about your business or the way in which your teams do work versus the way the big agencies probably are still doing work?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I think the reason that I started Ideasicle in the first place was because at that point, I had been at Wieden & Kennedy, Goodby, Arnold, Mullen, and a couple of other creative agencies. And I tell you that only because I met these genius creative people along the way. These people who were very creative, not in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but in 10 seconds. You give them a potent brief, and if it inspires them, they're rattling off ideas right there on the spot, almost like an improv comedian. And so I kind of went through my inventory of creatives that I really, really enjoyed working with for that reason, and creatives who, can leave their ego at the door. Because my vision for this was we don't need to have brainstorms inside a building, which I did a million of when I was the director of business development at Arnold. We don't need to do that anymore. The technology allows us to bring anybody together to come up with ideas and brainstorm. And not only that, if you think about a brainstorm at an agency, it happens on a Tuesday between 2 and 3 o'clock. Creativity doesn't work that way. You can't put a gun to the head of creativity and say, create. What you can do, though, is inspire. In my case, I've created a platform where I can bring any 4 people I want. I've got about 40 experts that I've pre-recruited, and they're all ready. They're all teed up. 1099 relationships with Ideasicle. And I can put any 4 together, and I know them. So I know what they're good at and what perspectives they bring. And I can kind of get Bill Belichickian with how I field the team, so that I don't have all the same kind of person, working on it. They're all very different, and, different genders, different worldviews, different talents even to some degree. But then when you put them all together and you have a potent brief, they all can work independently and then jump in when they have an idea. And when they post that idea, the rest of the team gets an email saying, hey, Will just posted an idea called blah, blah, blah. Click here to make it even better. Like, the whole vibe of the thing is nothing's ever done until the presentation. So if you post an idea, the expectation is that the rest of the team is going to jump on it. And, they might poo-poo it, but they're generally very polite to each other. But actually, the worst thing that can happen is if you post something and nobody posts anything underneath it. That basically means there's nothing there. But if you post something and everybody's kind of jumping in on it, you just touched a vibe, because now everyone brings their different perspectives to your original idea, and it takes a whole new life. And in one session, in 3 or 4 days, we could have 40 or 50 different idea threads all nicely organized on the platform I built. And so then it becomes on me to go through it. And to your point, like, you only knew me, but I think what I've figured out through this process since 2010, when I started this, is that my superpower is knowing a good idea when I see one. And so what I can do is go through all those ideas, get it down to 15 or so that I think are really, really great, that I'm excited to write up. And that's kind of my evaluation criteria, is if I can't wait to write it, into a slide to present to you, then that means it's a really good idea. And so I'll throw out 15 to the team and say, hey, which ones are the weakest ones? Can we get this down to 11 or 12? And so it's an iterative process with the team in that sense. But then I'll go write up the ones that I think are the team thinks are the best, present them to you, and then sit back. And by the way, I don't want to forget to say this because I think it's really super interesting. When a traditional agency, the way they make money is time of staff. And typically, so they're getting a monthly retainer. And when there's a creative presentation, the client doesn't care if they have to send the team back for another round of ideas because it's not going to cost them any more money. So they're kind of, in that first presentation, they might be leaning back a little bit and they might see a winning idea, but it's no skin off their back to send the team away to come up with more ideas in case they might beat it. Whereas with Ideasicle X, the client knows that they have 2 rounds. And so what are they doing? They're leaning in. They're looking for what to buy, not what to kill. It's a very different process. And so, again, it kind of gets to the sort of therapeutic benefit of what could my brand be, even if it's a promotional idea. Something as small as we need a promotional hook for retail for back to school. Something like that. Seeing all these different ideas from all these different brilliant people gets them excited because they're like, oh, it's like Christmas morning. And the gifts are all these ideas that they never thought of before. And it gets them jazzed. And, oftentimes, and I'm sure this happened with you guys with our process, the client makes the idea even better because they know that, we're just kind of going in and out over a couple of weeks, but you've been there for a long time. So hopefully some of the ideas will inspire even better ideas in the clients. And we're all for that. I mean, that's what creativity is. It's elastic, it's shareable, it's communal in a sense, with the way that we've constructed it. So I don't even remember your question, but I hope I answered it.
No, you touched on a couple of really interesting points, though, because I would say that one of the things that's actually, when you look at the model as it relates to like whether someone's on retainer or if someone's looking to kill something versus, to purchase something, I would actually say even some of the talent that sits in the room, like I've been in situations where I've sat down and someone's, super excited about something. And I'm like, that's just so boring. Like what, seriously, how much time did that take? I mean, so there are people that sit in those creative roles that are, to be honest, in some of the bigger agencies, they're just checking the boxes, right? Like we delivered this to the client and it's like, it looks very similar to something that's been done in the past. I mean, we're very fortunate in the work that we've done. I mean, our producer Joey here is creative for us on a lot of different things. And I mean, talk about creative mind. I mean, not just because he's sitting here, but I mean, this guy is like, he does an amazing job for us. And he also understands us, right? So he also knows like what we're doing. So there's good and bad in both of the equations. But I think one of the things, Will, that we talk about is, you talk about pairing these creatives together and a bunch of talent. Like, have you seen different results from creatives who have never worked together versus ones that have worked or continue to work together? Because I do think that also challenges one another. I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, in the beginning, a few of them may have known each other, but most of them didn't because I'm pulling them from my very different agencies past from different cities, and they're all over the country. But as they've, it's been 16 years now, so a lot of them have been there since the beginning, and they've gotten to know each other through the virtual process, and they kind of gotten to know the kinds of ideas they come up with. But I honestly, here's a fun fact. One of the female experts, and I think it's significant that it was a female, said she loved the Ideasicle process because everyone was reduced to a typeface. And I think that's interesting because it strips away all the icky, human, judgy stuff that happens when you're in a room that you may not even know is happening. It's unconscious stuff. But when you're reduced to a typeface, and yeah, there's a little profile picture and you can see that it's a woman or you can see it's a man or whatever, but the focus is all on the content. It's all about the idea. And so the judgment is in the right place. It's all about getting to a better creative idea. It's not about posturing. It's not about looking good in front of your boss. Even like if you think about a typical brainstorm, there's always the loud guy who thinks he's the smartest guy in the room and is not. And then there's the quiet person who probably is the smartest person in the room, but's not saying anything. But when they're protected in a way, like if you think about social media, one of the big problems with social media, conventionally speaking, is that people feel empowered to say anything because they're not in front of the people. You know what I mean? So they say things they would never say to someone's face. But that actually works in our favor with creativity because they're bolder. They're more likely to say something that they might not have said in a room. But if they say it online, they're sort of invisible in a sense, or they feel protected. And so we get bolder thinking thrown at the wall.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. But do you think, though, because a lot of these people that you have come from big agencies, and they obviously left them for a reason, right? I mean, that's, I just think the agency world is so different now. So, like, what are they... Like, what is their perspective and your perspective on like this versus being in the big agency? Is it like, are people poo-pooing the big agency or just like, no, this works for me better now and where I am in my life or my career path and all that? Like, because people are in big agencies still. People still doing this. People still making Progressive insurance commercials at Arnold's 45,000 years later. So what is your team as creatives, like what are they saying about the differences? Is it the autonomy, freedom?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think with Ideasicle X, nobody is making their whole living working for me. They're making their living doing traditional freelance with the big agencies, and they love Ideasicle X because they don't have to travel. They don't have to stay in a hotel and miss their family. If it's like a big pitch in New York, they got to be there for a couple of weeks. With Ideasicle X, they can do it virtually from anywhere. And to them, it's like a video game. You know, in fact, Ernie Schenk, who's one of my favorite experts, great storyteller, brilliant writer, one of the best of all time, he said it's like an idea video game to him. And so they have fun doing it. And, you might ask, well, are you sure they're not working on other stuff while they're working on your stuff? To which I say, I don't care. I don't care if they're working on something else during the day, because the way Ideasicle X works is if I can get them infected with a brilliant brief, where then they can't stop thinking about it. And I kind of want them to engage with life because that's where creativity happens. Ideas don't happen sitting behind a desk. They happen when you're engaging with the world. So if they are working on, say, a progressive TV spot for Arnold, that work might trigger an idea that they were briefed on yesterday for Ideasicle X, and all they have to do is pull out their phone, brr, bam. Then everybody gets it, and everybody can start building on it. So it's like taking the creative layer of these people, and that's all I need. I don't need their bodies. I don't need them to be present, at all times. I don't care about timesheets. All I care about is participation, and I already know they're brilliant, so I know that they're going to come up with great ideas. So hopefully that helps. But again, nobody is making their whole living with us. They're doing both for sure if they're a professional freelance.
Yeah, I think, Laura, this is interesting because it falls on, like, we're starting to see, we had not too long ago the fractional CMO role that came in, right? Like people who insert themselves into a situation or an organization for a period of time, very similar in this case, right? Like it's taking that approach of just, small doses of impactful moments, right? That you're pulling the right people in who will deliver great results, and then they might be gone for a period of time, but that's okay. That's what this is all about. Well, where should AI fit into this creative process? Like, where does it risk making ideas more predictable or interchangeable? Like, how do you see that as an overall part of the process?
To me, creativity is the one territory that AI, I don't think, will ever be able to overtake humans. And that's just my personal belief. I could be proven wrong. But what I believe, that doesn't mean that I poo-poo AI at all, because I think AI can be an incredibly useful tool to inspire ideas in humans. And in fact, I invented this little app called iX Spark, and it uses AI to come up with thought starters on any kind of brief that may not be the greatest ideas, but I encourage the app or the LLM to hallucinate. Like it's got a sober, it's got a microdose, and it's got a tripping setting. So it actually encourages it to hallucinate. So you get these wacky dots connected that are probably wrong. But the point is not that it comes up with great ideas. The point is that it could inspire you to come up with great ideas. And I've embedded that app in the Ideasicle X model so that the teams, when they're working, if they're stuck or they can't think anything, they just click a button and they can engage with this Spark character to come up with thought starters and see where that leads them. But, the bigger question to me with AI is production. It's democratizing production. Mm-hmm. And I've got, as you know very well, so I've got this one art director who's incredibly skilled at AI video production, to the point where, and we stumbled on this 2 years ago, where a client told us what their production budget was going to be. And it was so small that we were all like, we just presented TV campaigns. There's no way we could do this for that amount of money. But then this art director is like, you know what? I've been doing a lot of AI stuff. Let's try it with AI. And we did, and it was wildly successful. And so then it became part of our offering. Now we can do campaigns with the expectation that it's going to be executed using AI. And what we can do, I've got a great producer who helps me brief the team. So when the team works on an assignment, we know it's going to be AI execution, and there are limitations to what you can do in AI video production. So we brief the team right up front and tell them, here are the parameters, here are the things to watch out for, here are the things not to do. And so then they come up with ideas that can be produced using AI, and that's exactly what we did in your case.
Yeah, which was the production side of it. I mean, like when we saw it, Brian and I were like, okay, this feels like it was no AI. I mean, yeah, if we like peel back the layers, because we're also used to seeing AI or like calling, things out. But it's like, I think the thing that we said this recently, Brian, maybe on a podcast, maybe just in a conversation, but it's like, I don't care that it's right. Using AI. Like for us, it doesn't matter if someone says, "Oh, that's AI." Oh, I don't care. It told the story that we loved on a script in production, in the video creation. That was like, that's all that mattered. And are people out there saying, "Oh, they're using AI"? Like, I don't think it matters. Everyone's using AI to some degree. And to your point, production makes sense. There was efficiencies there, time and money wise, that I feel like that we're in a world where people are expecting that.
It was the best AI I've ever seen too. I mean, honestly, in the campaigns that or work that we've done with AI, I would challenge anyone to try to figure out, that it was using AI as the way that it was actually created. It was amazing. So.
Yeah. And it does take, hundreds of hours of work to do. Like you saw the finished thing, but there were probably maybe 1,000 clips that didn't work to get to the ones that did, because it just doesn't listen. Like you prompt it, you tell it this, and then all of a sudden it adds an umbrella. Like, why the hell did you add an umbrella? I didn't ask you to do that. But there are ways to do it, and this guy knows how to do that. And I think the product that we came out with for you guys was outstanding.
Yeah. But I think when you look at the hundreds of hours compared to creating a production set, right? Doing all the, at the times I can remember having to go get permitting and all that stuff to be able to pull into a spot and set up the shoot. And then, you're dealing with whether that's going to cooperate or not. You've only got so many hours of sunlight that you can deal with, and you've got to get this shot in order to be able to all of that stuff. So like when you say 100 hours, like when you look at that compared to the amount of time it takes to actually do a full production of something like that ends up being a 30 45 second clip, right? Like it's a lot. There's a lot of time there too.
And also think about, and the agencies are going to hate me for saying this, but think about what this does to their model, because everything you just described about a traditional shoot is the time of staff that they bill. And if AI can squash that, we presented a campaign. I can't talk about it yet, but we presented a campaign that would have cost about $3 million to produce in traditional ways, mostly because there were locations all over the world. So that alone would have escalated the bill. But using AI, we did the whole thing, the whole 30-second video for under $100,000.
Yeah. I think it just shows that the model is changing. And really that's, hitting home to the whole conversation, because it doesn't need to be. And again, those big agencies are still in business, so they're doing something, and there are brands that want to work that way and pay those retainers and all of that. So it's not to say it's gone, but like just seeing my network and following these agencies and things like it, you just see it's shifting. And there's other ways to do great work. But I have a question, you deal with a lot of brands and a lot of clients, and so you're presenting all these ideas to them. Do you think there's a need for a change in how companies and brands challenge and select ideas? Are you seeing an evolution there? Are you seeing the same mistakes happening with clients? What's the trend being on that side versus our side?
Yeah, I think the tolerance for a good idea is lower than ever. And the reason I say that is because we're in a content generation now. Every brand is coming out. If you go back 25 years ago, they might have 3 TV spots, 4 print ads, 3 out of home, and a few radio spots, and that's it. That's the whole campaign. Now there might be hundreds of videos. There might be hundreds of images, / print ad type objects. And so you can't, the client can't approve great for 100 videos in a year. And so the tolerance for great creativity, I think, lowers, because the value, at least the perceived value of having a steady stream of content is greater than the level of creativity. And I think it's just a volume play. I love it when a client like you guys, you're a great example. You basically needed content, but you wanted it to be great. That's, to me, that could be the new silver bullet for brands going forward. That let's put the brakes on just mass amounts of content, and let's instead do really great content and run it everywhere. I hope that's where it ends up going. We'll see.
Do you think, Will, on that same topic though, so great content, good content, do you think the safest ideas are still winning?
I don't have any data to support this, but no. I mean, I think the riskier the idea, the more provocative it is, the more likely it will be to stand out, number one, and be seen at all. But then, I mean, think about the power your consumer has. They can share it. You can't share a TV spot on TV. You can maybe tell somebody about it, but that's the next day. It's unlikely to happen. But if I'm inspired by some provocative content and it really speaks to me, I may share that, and then all of a sudden your media buy just went exponential.
But some clients aren't willing to take risks.
No.
We know that. We were
not.
Right. When we came into you, we were we want make us uncomfortable. And you guys made us very uncomfortable with some of those ideas. We were that's still far out. And we narrowed it in on one that is a little more comfortable than the other one we were going to go with. So I still feel clients must, we're afraid to take risks. So you still must face that with people when you guys really love a really cool, crazy idea, but the client's not going there.
Well, I think the difference is it's a little unfair, because if they're coming to me, they've already decided they want something great. And so I tend to get clients that are looking for great creative ideas. They're not looking for milquetoast and going to Ideasicle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think, Laura, even in our example, I think even though we weren't the riskiest we could be, we were definitely not as safe as we traditionally have been.
Right.
And the way
we went in saying we don't want, we don't want to see a player anywhere. But yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Will, before we're going to let you go, we are going to do one more activity, and you are going to enter the hot seat.
turning up the heat. Hot seat.
Speaking of AI,
That's right, Joey Joe. He knows his stuff. We've had many people ask if they could take their clips and use them somewhere else because they're always so fun. And we never hear them first. So Joey always surprises us.
That's great.
Okay. So we want to hear your biggest pet peeve in the creative process. Is it the endless rounds of email feedback? Is it that the client doesn't want to get in a call? They want to just email, not talk about it? Is it that a client expects a campaign to go viral? Like, what is that big pet peeve that you still deal with in the process?
Yeah, I think it's more internal than with clients. To me, it's creative arrogance. Like it doesn't happen often, but it does happen where one of my creatives will be like a dog with a bone on an idea and not want to make the changes that the client's suggesting, which I strategically agree with. For whatever reason. And so then I have to go do a sideline with them and say, God, you're too dug in on this. And they're bringing up really good points. And I think you got to lighten up. It's still going to be a great spot. The overall concept is protected. It's just this one little thing. And so it's a pet peeve. It's just an annoyance, but it's part of the process because at the same time, I want these people to defend their work. I want them to dig their heels in. So it's just kind of the nature of the business, still something I got to deal with.
But I think that's actually a really good one because I know and I've spent more time on as the client, and obviously I've never been in an agency world or doing anything like that. But there is nothing worse than someone who digs in to that degree and it's not what the client wants. There's just nothing worse than that, and trying to get past that. And you I mean, at the end of the day, the client's the client. And at the same time, I also respect the fact that the creative is the creative, right? Like someone has a thought and process. And that's why I think, some of the conversations that you have in that process are so critical and to be honest with each other. But like we've had moments where we've just had to say, you know what? No, you're not understanding. Like that's not what we're going for. Like I appreciate your creativity here, but that's not what I was trying to get to. So
yeah, and I try to protect you guys from that. I try to protect the client from those conversations. I mean, sometimes it's going to happen, but I just try to trust my gut as a marketer. I try to put myself in the client's shoes so that I understand, hopefully almost as well as they do, why they're asking for this change. And then I can bring it to the creative in an informed way, not in a light way.
Yeah, I think and we didn't see that at all with your team. I felt like, there was like no egos. And that's a big part of why I didn't love the big agency world was a lot of those egos. So it's good that that's where you're like checking those at the door, but you still have the passion. I mean, I'm going to call it passion. I mean, someone's passionate about something. And so I respect that. But yes, in the end, it's like, no, like you got to move on. So that's interesting. And I think it's great that you do protect the client because there's no time, we don't have time for that, right? Like that's just where we just have to move on.
Yeah, I don't have time for it either.
Yeah, but you have to make time in your job. All right. Well, thank you, Will. This has been super fun to have you on, seeing you again, bringing people back from the network from many years ago. So we appreciate your time and joining us.
I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Will, thanks so much for being here. It was awesome. So, Laura, this is really interesting. This conversation actually does turn 180 degrees from some of the other conversations where we've had about people needing to be in a room looking at each other, sitting side by side in order for that creative process to work. And in this particular case, we're learning some of just the opposite. And I think the model is an interesting one. I think that, I think a lot of folks have been challenged by, bringing, and again, I've had really good experiences both with smaller agencies, larger agencies. We've done some in-house stuff, but I think, from a corporate side, I think there's a lot of pressure to pull some of those resources in-house. But I think some of what Will mentioned in regards to sort of that, getting stuck, right, with in-house and needing some of that external view in order to progress an idea or a thought is really important for some of these smaller businesses. So I think, again, this was a great experience for us working with Will and his team. And I would encourage folks that are out there that are looking for something different and trying something a little bit different to engage with them. But overall, I think, there's a lot to be learned here. And I think it was a great conversation.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you can go get big creative talent, like really great creative thinkers, in a way that's a lot more affordable and attainable. That just makes complete sense, because you're not going, that the arsenal of people he has are people that have done amazing, award-winning work, and you can get their thinking for in a very easy way. It was a very easy process, so I 100% agree. Well, thank you everyone for listening. And most importantly, if you like what you heard today, be sure to follow us. And if you want to hear more from Will Burns, you can find him on LinkedIn.